The auction block felt rougher than anything Olivia Zhang had ever touched in her 22 years, and as she stood there with trembling knees in the scorching Texas sun of Del Rio in 1882, she wondered if this humiliation would be the final indignity her life had to offer. The dusty main street stretched before her, lined with weathered storefronts and curious onlookers who had gathered not out of kindness but out of morbid entertainment, watching as the auctioneer wiped sweat from his brow and tried once more to drum up interest in the Chinese woman who could supposedly cook. "Now, gentlemen, I assure you this one here can make a fine meal," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the small crowd that had assembled. "She's got papers saying she worked in San Francisco at a respectable establishment before circumstances brought her here. Starting bid is $50 for her contract." Olivia kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, refusing to meet the gazes of the men below. She had learned long ago that showing fear only invited cruelty, though her heart hammered so loudly she felt certain everyone could hear it. The contract she had signed in desperation 3 months ago had seemed like salvation when she had nowhere else to turn after her elderly employer died, leaving her stranded without references or means. The labor broker had promised her honest work at a ranch, but instead, she had been shuffled from one place to another, deemed unsuitable each time, for reasons that had everything to do with her heritage and nothing to do with her skills. $50? A voice called out skeptically. "For a cook? That seems mighty steep, especially for one like her." The auctioneer's face reddened. "Now see here, she comes with a full-year contract and proven experience. That's worth something." "Not to me," another man said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "I got no use for anyone who can't speak proper English." Olivia bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. Her English was perfectly adequate, but she had learned that pointing this out only made things worse. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel sweat trickling down her back beneath the plain gray dress that had seen better days. Around her neck hung a simple jade pendant, the only thing of value she still possessed, a gift from her mother before she had died when Olivia was 15. $40 then, the auctioneer said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "Surely someone here needs a cook. Winter's coming and you'll all need hot meals." The crowd remained silent. Olivia felt her stomach twist with dread. She knew what happened to contracted workers nobody wanted. They got sent to the worst possible places, to men who treated them as less than human, or they simply disappeared into the territories where law held no sway. $30. The auctioneer tried again, and now Olivia could hear the defeat in his voice. "Come now, that's a bargain." A few men laughed, but nobody raised their hands. Olivia felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes and commanded them not to fall. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly and focused on a point far beyond the town, where the Texas landscape stretched out in endless browns and dusty greens. The sound of horse hooves on packed earth cut through the murmuring crowd, and people turned to look as a rider approached. Olivia did not turn her head, but she could hear the horse coming to a stop, could hear the creak of leather as the rider dismounted. Heavy footsteps climbed the wooden steps to the auction block, and then a man was standing beside the auctioneer, his presence somehow filling the entire space. "What did you say her skills were?" a deep voice asked, and Olivia could not help but glance sideways at the speaker. He was tall, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy, worn but clean denim and a shirt that had been mended more than once. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a startling gray that seemed to take in everything with quiet intensity. "She's a cook, mister," the auctioneer said quickly, perking up at the show of interest. "Worked in San Francisco at a fine establishment. Current bid is at $30. The cowboy looked directly at Olivia then, and she found herself unable to look away. His gaze was not like the others, not filled with contempt or crude assessment. Instead, he seemed to be searching for something, though what, she could not guess. "Can you make bread?" he asked her directly, his voice quieter now, meant only for her ears. Olivia swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir. I can make bread, biscuits, sourdough, any kind you want." "How about beef stew? Can you make something that will stick to a man's ribs after a long day?" "Yes, sir." Her voice was steadier now. "I can make stew, roasts, fried chicken, pies, preserves, anything you need." He studied her for a long moment, then turned back to the auctioneer. $100. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. The auctioneer's eyes went wide. "Did you say 100, mister?" "I did." The cowboy pulled a leather pouch from his belt and counted out gold coins that gleamed in the sunlight. "That's for her contract, full year, and I'll be taking her papers now." "Well, I'll be damned," someone in the crowd muttered. Vernon Dalton's finally lost his mind. So, that was his name. Vernon Dalton. Olivia watched as he handed over the money without hesitation, his expression never changing. The auctioneer scrambled to produce the papers, clearly eager to complete this unexpected transaction before the buyer changed his mind. "Sign here, mister, and she's all yours. Well, her contract is, I mean to say." Vernon signed quickly, then took the papers and folded them carefully into his vest pocket. Only then did he turn back to Olivia, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way that made her chest ache unexpectedly. "Do you have any belongings you need to collect?" She shook her head. Everything she owned was in the small canvas bag at her feet. Vernon picked it up without being asked, then offered her his hand to help her down from the auction block. His palm was calloused and warm, and Olivia took it carefully, acutely aware of every eye watching them. The crowd parted as Vernon led her toward his horse, a sturdy bay mare with intelligent eyes. He secured Olivia's bag to the saddle, then turned to her again. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he said quietly, "but I give you my word that you'll be treated fairly. My ranch is about 5 miles from here. We can ride double if you're able, or I can arrange for a wagon." "I can ride," Olivia said, though in truth, she had only been on a horse a handful of times in her life. Vernon mounted first, then reached down to pull her up behind him. "Hold on around my waist. I'll go slow." Olivia hesitated only a moment before wrapping her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. The horse started forward at an easy walk, and they left Del Rio behind, heading out into the open country, where the late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. They rode in silence for the first mile, and Olivia tried to steady her racing thoughts. $100 was an astronomical sum for a cook's contract. Men did not spend that kind of money without expecting something in return, and she had been in this world long enough to know what men usually wanted from women in her position. Fear coiled in her stomach, but she forced herself to breathe slowly and wait. Running was not an option, not out here with nowhere to go. "You're probably wondering why I paid so much," Vernon said finally, his voice carrying easily over the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves. "Yes, sir." Olivia's voice came out barely above a whisper. "My ranch is small, just me and 3 other hands. We've been making do with our own cooking for 2 years now, and I'm not ashamed to say we're all heartily sick of burned beans and tough meat. I've been trying to hire a cook for months, but nobody wants to come work at a small outfit in the middle of nowhere." He paused, and Olivia felt him take a breath. "When I saw you up there, saw how everyone was treating you, I got angry. Nobody deserves that kind of disrespect, especially not someone who's just trying to make an honest living." Olivia did not know what to say to that. In her experience, words were cheap, and only actions mattered, but something in Vernon's voice rang true, and she found herself wanting to believe him. "The $100 was partly to make a point to those vultures back there," Vernon continued, "and partly because I meant what I said about you being valuable. A good cook is worth their weight in gold on a working ranch, and if you can do half of what that auctioneer claimed, you'll more than earn your keep." "What exactly would my duties be?" Olivia asked carefully. "Cooking 3 meals a day for 4 men, 5 if we take on an extra hand during branding season, keeping the kitchen and dining area clean, maybe some laundry if you're willing, but that's not required by your contract. You'd have your own room in the main house, and Sundays are your day off." It sounded almost too good to be true. Olivia tightened her grip slightly as the horse navigated a rocky patch. "And nothing else?" Vernon twisted slightly to look back at her, and his gray eyes were serious. "I'm not going to lie to you and say the other men won't take notice of you. But if anyone shows you disrespect or makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately and I'll handle it. You're there to cook, nothing more. Anyone who forgets that will be looking for work elsewhere." The knot in Olivia's stomach loosened slightly. "Thank you, sir. And you can stop calling me sir. Vernon is fine, or boss if you prefer to keep it professional." A hint of something that might have been humor entered his voice. "Though the men will probably insist on mister when you're serving meals, cowboys have strange ideas about formality." They crested a low rise, and Vernon pointed ahead to where a cluster of buildings was visible in the distance. That's home. It's not much, but it's honest work and clean living. As they drew closer, Olivia could see that the ranch was indeed modest but well maintained. A main house, small but sturdy, stood alongside a barn, a bunkhouse, and several corrals. Chickens scratched in the dirt near what looked like a vegetable garden that had seen better days, and a few cattle grazed in a nearby pasture. Everything spoke of hard work and careful management, of a man who took pride in what he built, even if it was not grand. Two men emerged from the barn as they approached, and Vernon raised a hand in greeting. He dismounted first, then helped Olivia down, his hands respectful on her waist. Her legs were shaky after the ride, but she managed to stand steady. "Boys, this is Olivia Zhang. She's our new cook," Vernon announced. "Olivia, this is Marcus Reed and Tommy Sullivan." Marcus was older, perhaps 40, with graying hair and a weather-beaten face that crinkled when he smiled. Tommy looked barely 20, tall and gangly with red hair and an abundance of freckles. Both men removed their hats politely. "Madam," Marcus said with a nod. "It's a pleasure. We've been eating Vernon's cooking for too long." "Hey now," Vernon protested mildly. "My cooking isn't that bad." "Boss, last week you burned water," Tommy said earnestly, and Marcus snorted with laughter. "That was one time, and I was distracted by that broken fence in the north pasture." Vernon shook his head, but was smiling slightly. "Anyway, Olivia will be staying in the spare room off the kitchen. Let's get her settled, and then we can discuss meal arrangements." The main house was simple, but cleaner than Olivia had expected. Vernon led her through a front room that served as both sitting area and office, then into a kitchen that was spacious and well-equipped. A large iron stove dominated one wall, and there were sturdy counters, a good-sized table, and plenty of shelves for supplies. Through a door on the far side, Olivia could see a small bedroom, with a single bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains in the distance. "It's not fancy, but the bed's comfortable and the room stays cool in summer," Vernon said, setting her bag down on the bed. "The pump is just outside the back door, and we keep the wood box filled for the stove. The pantry's through there, though I'll admit our supplies have been running low. I usually make a trip to town once a month for staples." Olivia walked slowly around the kitchen, taking inventory. The stove was clean, the pots and pans well seasoned. Someone had made an effort here, even if the cooking itself had been lacking. "When would you like me to start?" "No rush tonight. It's already late and you've had a rough day." Vernon pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. "But if you're up for it tomorrow, breakfast is usually at dawn, lunch at noon, and supper around 6. The men aren't picky, but they work hard and need substantial meals." Olivia sat carefully, folding her hands in her lap. Now that the adrenaline of the day was wearing off, exhaustion was setting in, but she forced herself to focus. "Do you have chickens for eggs?" "About a dozen laying hens. They're temperamental, but they produce well enough." "And the garden?" Vernon grimaced. "I'm better with cattle than vegetables, I'm afraid. It's mostly gone to weeds this year. I could tend it if you'd like. Fresh vegetables would improve the meals." Olivia surprised herself with the offer, but something about this place, about Vernon's straightforward manner, made her want to do good work here. "That would be welcome?" Vernon's expression softened. "You should know, Olivia, that I meant what I said earlier. You're safe here. I know you have no reason to trust that yet, but I hope in time you'll see I'm a man of my word." Olivia met his gray eyes and saw only sincerity there. "I hope so too, Vernon." He stood then, moving toward the pantry. "Let me show you what we have for supplies, and then I'll leave you to rest. Tomorrow's soon enough for everything else." They spent the next 20 minutes going through the pantry, which was better stocked than Olivia had feared. There was flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, rice, some canned goods, and a decent supply of coffee. In the cold cellar, accessible through a trap door, she found potatoes, onions, and some withered carrots. It was enough to work with, especially with fresh eggs and the chickens themselves if needed. "I can make a good breakfast tomorrow," Olivia said, her mind already planning. "Biscuits, gravy, eggs, and bacon if you have any. There's bacon in the smokehouse and some salt pork." Vernon looked almost boyishly hopeful. "Real biscuits? It's been months since we had decent bread." "Real biscuits," Olivia confirmed, and was rewarded with a genuine smile that transformed Vernon's serious face. Then I'll leave you to settle in. The men and I will be in the bunkhouse if you need anything, but you should be comfortable here. The doors all have locks, and nobody will disturb you. He paused at the kitchen door, hat in hand. Welcome to the Dalton Ranch, Olivia. I'm glad you're here. After he left, Olivia stood in the quiet kitchen for a long moment, trying to process the strange turn her life had taken. This morning, she had woken in a cramped boarding house room in Del Rio, dreading the auction she knew was coming. Now she stood in her own space, however modest, with the promise of honest work and respectful treatment. It seemed too good to be true, and yet Vernon Dalton had not struck her as a man who dealt in false promises. She explored her small room more thoroughly, finding clean sheets on the bed and a quilt that looked handmade. The washstand had a pitcher of water and a basin, and there were hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. It was simple, but it was more than she had expected, more than she had dared hope for. That night, Olivia lay in the unfamiliar bed and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the evening. Horses whickered softly in the barn, and somewhere a coyote called to the rising moon. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could build something resembling a life. She woke before dawn, her body trained by years of kitchen work to rise early. Moving quietly, she lit the lamps and got the stove going, grateful to find that someone had laid kindling and wood ready the night before. While the stove heated, she gathered eggs from the hen house, pleased to find 8 fresh ones waiting. The chickens eyed her suspiciously, but she spoke softly to them and they settled. Back in the kitchen, she worked quickly and efficiently, mixing biscuit dough and setting it to rest while she sliced bacon and prepared the gravy. The familiar rhythm of cooking soothed her nerves, and she found herself humming softly as she worked. This was something she knew, something she was good at, and it felt good to use her skills again. The sky was just beginning to lighten when she heard the men stirring. Marcus came in first, drawn by the smell of coffee and frying bacon. His eyes widened when he saw the spread on the table. "Madam, if this is a dream, please don't wake me up," he said reverently. Tommy arrived moments later, followed by Vernon, who stopped in the doorway and simply stared. Olivia had set the table properly, with plates and utensils at each place. In the center sat a platter piled high with golden biscuits, another with crispy bacon, and a bowl of steaming sausage gravy. There were scrambled eggs, fresh and fluffy, and mugs of strong, hot coffee. "Olivia," Vernon said quietly, "this is incredible." She felt her cheeks warm with pleasure at the genuine appreciation in his voice. "It's just breakfast. Please, sit and eat while it's hot." The men needed no further encouragement. They sat down and began passing dishes, and the room filled with the sounds of eating and satisfied groans. Olivia poured coffee and watched with satisfaction as they devoured everything she had made. This was her craft, her art, and seeing it appreciated filled her with a sense of purpose she had been missing. "Miss Olivia," Tommy said through a mouthful of biscuit, then swallowed and tried again more politely. "These are the best biscuits I've ever had, even better than my mama's, though don't tell her I said that." "Your secret is safe with me," Olivia said with a small smile. Marcus was working on his 3rd helping of eggs when he looked up at Vernon. "Boss, I don't know what you paid for her contract, but it wasn't enough." Vernon met Olivia's eyes across the table, and something warm passed between them. "I paid exactly what she was worth, which is more than those fools in town could see." The compliment, delivered in Vernon's matter-of-fact way, made Olivia's heart skip unexpectedly. She busied herself at the stove, confused by her own reaction. She barely knew this man, and yet there was something about him that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced before. After breakfast, the men headed out to their day's work, and Olivia cleaned the kitchen, taking stock of what she would need for lunch. She was scrubbing the last pot when Vernon returned, his boots loud on the wooden floor. "I'm heading into town for some supplies," he said. "Is there anything special you need for cooking?" Olivia dried her hands and pulled out a piece of paper where she had already been making a list. "If it's not too much trouble, these things would help me provide better variety in the meals." Vernon took the list and scanned it, nodding. "This is all reasonable. I'll get everything here. Is there anything you'd like for yourself? Some fabric for a new dress, maybe, or personal items?" The offer surprised her. "The contract doesn't require you to provide those things." No, but I'm offering anyway. Vernon's expression was serious. You're working hard, Olivia. You should have what you need to be comfortable. Olivia thought about her two threadbare dresses, the lack of proper undergarments, the little luxuries she had not been able to afford in months. Some fabric would be welcome, and thread. If you don't mind, I can sew. Consider it done. I should be back by mid-afternoon. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something, then added, I also wanted to say that if you ever feel unsafe or uncomfortable here, for any reason, you tell me. And if for some reason you can't tell me, there's a woman in town, Mrs. Harriet Cooper, who runs the general store. She's good people, and she'd help you if you needed it. The fact that he was giving her an outside contact, someone to turn to if he himself became the problem, spoke volumes. Olivia felt the last of her defensive walls begin to crack. Thank you, Vernon. That means a great deal. He nodded, settling his hat on his head. I'll see you this afternoon. After he left, Olivia turned her attention to the neglected garden. She found tools in the barn and spent the morning pulling weeds and assessing what could be salvaged. There were tomato plants struggling beneath the weeds, some squash that might still produce, and herbs that had gone wild but could be tamed. The physical work felt good, and she lost herself in the simple pleasure of working the soil. At noon, she prepared a simple lunch of sandwiches and leftover biscuits, which Marcus and Tommy devoured with enthusiasm. The afternoon passed in planning and preparation for supper, and by the time Vernon returned with 2 horses laden with supplies, Olivia had a pot roast in the oven and fresh bread rising on the counter. Vernon helped her unload, and Olivia's eyes widened at the bounty he had brought. Everything on her list was there, plus extras she had not requested. Fresh vegetables, a block of good cheese, dried fruits, spices she had only dreamed of having access to, and several yards of calico fabric in a soft blue color, along with thread, needles, and buttons. Vernon, this is too much, she protested. It's what you'll need to do your job properly, he said firmly. And the fabric is a bonus for the excellent work you've already done. The men are happier than I've seen them in months. That evening's supper was even more successful than breakfast. The pot roast was tender and flavorful, served with roasted potatoes and carrots, fresh bread with butter, and an apple cobbler Olivia had managed to throw together from some withered apples she had found in the cellar. The men ate with the focused intensity of people who had been deprived and were now being abundantly fed. Miss Olivia, Marcus said as he finished his second helping of cobbler, I think I speak for all of us when I say that having you here is the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years. Tommy nodded vigorously, too busy eating to speak. Vernon, sitting at the head of the table, smiled slightly and met Olivia's eyes. I'd say that's a fair assessment, he agreed quietly. Over the following weeks, Olivia settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her mornings tending the garden and preparing lunch, and used her afternoons for baking, preserving, and preparing the evening meal. The work was demanding but satisfying in a way her previous positions had never been. Here, her efforts were noticed and appreciated. The men never failed to thank her for meals, and Vernon made a point of asking her opinion on household matters. But it was more than just appreciation that made the Dalton Ranch feel different. There was a sense of respect, of being treated as a valued member of the household rather than a servant. When the men tracked mud into the kitchen, they apologized and cleaned it up themselves. When supplies ran low, Vernon asked what she needed rather than dictating what she should make do with. On Sundays, when she had the day off, they fended for themselves without complaint and left the kitchen spotless for her return. And then there was Vernon himself. Olivia found herself increasingly aware of him, of the quiet competence with which he ran the ranch, of the fair way he treated his men, of the unexpected gentleness in his calloused hands. She noticed how he always held doors for her, how he asked about her day during meals, how his rare smiles seemed to transform his serious face. She told herself it was gratitude she felt, nothing more. Vernon had rescued her from a terrible situation and treated her with more respect than anyone in years. It was natural to feel warmth toward him, but gratitude did not explain the way her heart quickened when she heard his boots on the porch, or the way she found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, or the strange disappointment she felt when days passed without them having a real conversation beyond logistical discussions of meals and supplies. It was late October when everything changed. Vernon had been away for 3 days, helping a neighboring rancher round up cattle that had broken through a fence. Marcus and Tommy had accompanied him, leaving Olivia alone at the ranch for the first time. She had not minded the solitude, had even enjoyed the chance to work on her sewing and take long walks around the property. But on the third evening, as she was preparing a simple supper for one, she heard horses approaching at a gallop. Olivia stepped onto the porch and felt her stomach drop. 3 men she did not recognize were riding into the yard, and something about their manner set off alarm bells in her mind. They were dusty and rough-looking, and the way they stared at her as they dismounted made her skin crawl. "Well, well," the tallest one said, revealing tobacco-stained teeth in what might have been meant as a smile. "Looks like Dalton's got himself some company. We were hoping to find him home." "Vernon is away on business," Olivia said, keeping her voice steady. "He should return tomorrow. I can give him a message if you'd like to leave one." "Oh, we're in no hurry." The man stepped onto the porch, and Olivia backed toward the door. "Why don't you invite us in for some coffee while we wait?" "I'm afraid that wouldn't be appropriate." Olivia's hand found the door handle behind her. "If you'd like to leave your names, I'll tell Vernon you called." The man's false friendliness evaporated. "Now, that's not very hospitable. We've been riding all day, and we're tired and thirsty. Surely Dalton wouldn't want his hired help turning away visitors." "The lady said no," a new voice cut in, and Olivia's heart leaped with relief as Vernon stepped around the corner of the house, rifle held casually in his hands. Marcus and Tommy were behind him, both armed as well. "And I'd appreciate it if you got off my porch, Blake." The tall man, Blake, held up his hands in mock surrender. "Easy there, Dalton. We just stopped by friendly-like. There's nothing friendly about 3 armed men showing up at my ranch when I'm away and intimidating my cook." Vernon's voice was cold, and Olivia realized she was seeing a different side of him, the hard edge that allowed a man to survive in this harsh country. "State your business or ride out. Your choice." Blake's eyes narrowed, but he stepped back. "Heard you might be hiring for winter work. Thought we'd inquire." "You heard wrong. I've got all the hands I need." Vernon moved closer, positioning himself between the strangers and Olivia. "And even if I was hiring, I wouldn't take on men who don't know how to treat a lady with respect. Now get." The 3 men mounted up, but Blake paused, looking past Vernon to Olivia. "You sure you want to be out here all alone with these men, darling? If you ever need help, you just send word to Blake Harrison. I'll come running." Vernon took a step forward, and his voice dropped to something dangerous. "If you or any of your friends come within a mile of this ranch again, Harrison, you'll regret it. Now ride out before I lose my temper." Blake spurred his horse, and the 3 men galloped away into the gathering darkness. Only when they were well out of sight did Vernon lower his rifle and turn to Olivia. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" Olivia shook her head, though she was trembling. "They just arrived a few minutes before you did. I was trying to send them away when you came." Vernon's jaw was tight with anger, but his voice was gentle when he spoke to her. "You did exactly right. Never let strange men into the house when you're alone, no matter what they say. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. It's not your fault." Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "Who was that man?" "Blake Harrison. He's got a reputation as a troublemaker, and I should have warned you about him." Vernon handed his rifle to Tommy. "Take care of the horses, would you? I want to talk to Olivia for a minute." Tommy and Marcus led the horses away, and Vernon gestured to the chairs on the porch. "Can we sit? There are some things you should know." They sat, and for a moment Vernon was silent, staring out at the darkening landscape. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. "Harrison and his friends are drifters, the kind who make their living on the wrong side of the law, cattle rustling mostly, but there have been rumors of worse. I've had run-ins with them before, and they don't like me much." "Because you stand up to them," Olivia said quietly. "Because I won't look the other way when they steal from my neighbors." Vernon turned to face her, and in the fading light, his eyes were serious. "I need you to understand, Olivia, that having you here might have made you a target. Men like Harrison, they look for weaknesses, for leverage, and they might think you're mine." "Am I?" The question slipped out before Olivia could stop it, and she felt her face heat with embarrassment. "I mean, they might think I'm yours, is what I mean to say." Vernon was quiet for a long moment. "I paid $100 for your contract in front of half the town. Yeah, they probably think something more than cooking is going on here." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "I'm sorry about that. It wasn't my intention to put you in a difficult position." "You saved me from a much worse position," Olivia said firmly. "I haven't forgotten that, and I'm not afraid of what people think. You're braver than I gave you credit for." Vernon's voice held admiration. "But I want you to know that if you ever feel unsafe here, if Harrison or anyone else bothers you, you tell me immediately. And if something happens to me, you take one of the horses and you ride straight to Mrs. Cooper's store in town. She'll help you." The thought of something happening to Vernon made Olivia's chest tighten with fear. "Don't talk like that. I'm being practical," but Vernon's expression softened slightly. "Though I appreciate the concern." They sat in comfortable silence as full dark fell, and Olivia found herself reluctant to go inside, to break this moment of quiet connection. Finally, Vernon stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, you must be tired, and that supper you were making smells too good to waste. We'll all feel better after we eat." The meal was quieter than usual, with an undercurrent of tension that had not been there before. But afterward, as Olivia cleaned up, Vernon lingered in the kitchen, unusual for him. "I've been thinking," he said finally. "Winter's coming, and with it, longer nights and more time spent indoors. It might be nice to have some entertainment. Do you play cards, Olivia?" "A little. My father taught me before he died." Olivia dried the last plate and put it away. "Why?" "The men and I usually play on Sunday evenings. Would you like to join us? Unless you'd prefer to keep your day off to yourself, which I'd understand completely." The offer surprised and pleased her. "I'd like that, actually. It gets lonely with just my own company." Vernon smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles that made him look years younger. "Good, then it's settled. This Sunday, we'll teach you to play poker properly." That Sunday evening marked a turning point. Olivia joined the men at the kitchen table, and they taught her the finer points of poker, laughing at her mistakes and cheering when she won her first hand. Tommy told ridiculous stories that made everyone laugh, and Marcus shared tales of his younger days cowboying in Montana. But it was Vernon that Olivia found herself most aware of, sitting across from her, his gray eyes crinkling with amusement when she bluffed badly, his long fingers deft as he dealt the cards. The weekly card games became a ritual, and with them came a growing ease between Olivia and the men, especially Vernon. They began to have longer conversations during meals, discussing everything from ranch business to books they had read to their dreams for the future. Olivia learned that Vernon had inherited the ranch from his father 3 years ago and had been slowly building it up from near bankruptcy. Vernon learned that Olivia's parents had been immigrants who worked themselves to exhaustion running a laundry in San Francisco, and that she had turned to cooking to escape that fate. "Do you ever wish you'd done something different?" Vernon asked one evening in late November as they sat on the porch after supper. The others had retired to the bunkhouse, but these moments alone had become increasingly common, neither of them quite ready to end the day. Olivia considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if my parents had lived, if I'd been able to go to school longer, to maybe become a teacher like I dreamed. But then I think about all the places I've been, all the things I've learned, and I can't quite regret the path I've walked. Even the hard parts led me here. Here to this drafty ranch in the middle of nowhere?" Vernon's tone was light, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "Here to a place where I feel valued," Olivia said softly. "Here to people who treat me with respect and kindness. That's more than I dared hope for when I was standing on that auction block." Vernon was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "That day in Del Rio, when I saw you up there, saw the way they were treating you like you were nothing, something in me just broke. I couldn't walk away. And I'm glad I didn't, Olivia. You've brought life to this place, and not just because of your cooking. You've made it feel like a home again." Olivia's heart was pounding. "Vernon, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She took a breath, gathering her courage. "When you bid on my contract, I was terrified. I thought you might be like other men I'd encountered, men who saw women in my position as easy prey. But you weren't. You've been nothing but kind and respectful. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being afraid." She met his eyes. "And I started feeling something else entirely." Vernon leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. "What do you feel?" I feel happy when I hear you coming in from the range. I find myself cooking your favorite foods just to see you smile. I lie awake at night thinking about our conversations, about the sound of your laugh. She was trembling now, but forced herself to continue. I think I'm falling in love with you, Vernon Dalton, and I don't know what to do about it. For a moment that felt like an eternity, Vernon said nothing. Then slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand in his. His calloused palm was warm, solid, real. Olivia, I've been trying not to feel what I feel for you. You work for me, and I didn't want you to think you had to return my feelings out of obligation or fear. But the truth is, I started falling for you the moment you squared your shoulders on that auction block and refused to let them break you. I fell harder every morning when I woke up to the smell of your cooking and knew you were here, part of my life. And I fell completely when I started looking for excuses to spend time with you, to hear your voice, to see your smile. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet, and suddenly they were standing close, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. I love you, Olivia. I want you here not as my cook, but as my partner, my equal. I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. Vernon cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle, and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, tentative and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they parted, both were smiling. I don't have much to offer you, Vernon said, resting his forehead against hers. Just this ranch, hard work, and a man who loves you more than anything in this world. That's everything I need, Olivia replied, and kissed him again. They stood there on the porch, holding each other as the stars came out overhead, and Olivia felt as if all the hard roads of her life had been leading to this moment, to this man, to this place that had become home. The next morning, Vernon announced their intentions to Marcus and Tommy over breakfast. Marcus grinned wide and clapped Vernon on the back. About time, boss. Tommy and I had a bet going on how long it would take you to work up the courage. Who won? Vernon asked, amused. I did, Tommy said proudly. I said you'd confess before Thanksgiving. Marcus thought you'd wait until Christmas. Glad I could settle your wager. Vernon reached across the table and took Olivia's hand, a gesture that felt both natural and momentous. We'll need to go into town to arrange for a wedding. I want to do this properly. I'll need to buy out my contract first, Olivia said quietly. I don't want there to be any question about my status. Vernon shook his head. I burned those papers 2 weeks ago. You've been free since then, Olivia. I just didn't know how to tell you without you thinking I expected something in return. Fresh tears pricked Olivia's eyes. Even in this, Vernon had thought of her dignity, her autonomy. Thank you, she whispered. They rode into Del Rio the next day, just the two of them, and made their way to Mrs. Cooper's general store. The older woman took one look at them, at their clasped hands and glowing faces, and smiled knowingly. Vernon Dalton, if you've come to tell me you're finally marrying this lovely girl, I'm going to be very happy. That's exactly what we've come to tell you, Mrs. Cooper. Vernon's pride was evident in his voice, and to ask if you'd help us arrange it. We'd like to be married soon, but we want to do it right. Mrs. Cooper came around the counter and took both of Olivia's hands in hers. My dear, I'm so glad. I've been hoping Vernon would see sense ever since he brought you home that day. You deserve happiness, both of you. With Mrs. Cooper's help, they arranged for a simple ceremony to be held at the small church in Del Rio in 2 weeks' time. It would give Olivia time to sew a proper dress and for Vernon to make arrangements at the ranch. Word spread quickly through the small town, and to Olivia's surprise and gratitude, the response was largely positive. The same people who had ignored her at the auction now nodded politely when they passed her on the street, and several women stopped to offer congratulations. They see you differently now, Vernon explained as they rode home. You're not some nameless woman being sold. You're Vernon Dalton's intended bride, and that gives you standing in their eyes. Does it bother you that their respect for me is contingent on my connection to you? Olivia asked. Vernon considered the question seriously. It bothers me that that's how the world works, but I'm practical enough to accept it if it means you're treated better. Does it bother you? A little, Olivia admitted. But I'm practical too, and honestly, their opinions matter less to me than they used to. The people whose respect I care about, I already have. The 2 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Olivia sewed her wedding dress from the blue calico Vernon had bought her, adding lace trim that Mrs. Cooper donated from her stock. Marcus and Tommy cleaned the ranch from top to bottom, insisting that everything should be perfect for when the newlyweds returned. Vernon rode out to neighboring ranches to invite the few friends he had in the area, and slowly a real celebration began to take shape. 3 days before the wedding, as Olivia was working in the garden, she heard horses approaching. Her heart jumped with old fear, but when she looked up, she saw it was Vernon returning from town with a wagon, and sitting beside him, to her shock, was a Chinese woman about her mother's age. Vernon helped the woman down, then came to Olivia with an expression that was half pride, half nervousness. "Olivia, this is Mrs. Lin. She runs a boarding house in El Paso and is a friend of Mrs. Cooper's cousin. I thought, since you don't have family here, you might like to have someone from your community at the wedding." Olivia felt tears streaming down her face. Vernon had thought of this, had gone to the trouble of finding and inviting this woman because he understood what it would mean to her. Mrs. Lin smiled kindly and opened her arms, and Olivia went into them, sobbing with gratitude and joy. There, child," Mrs. Lin murmured in Chinese, the language of Olivia's childhood. "Let it out. These are good tears, yes?" "Yes," Olivia managed, "the best kind." That evening, with Mrs. Lin in the house and the wedding only days away, Olivia found herself on the porch again with Vernon. It had become their place, this quiet spot where they could talk without the eyes of the world upon them. "Thank you for bringing Mrs. Lin," Olivia said, leaning against his shoulder. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." Vernon wrapped his arm around her. "You've given up so much, Olivia, your culture, your language, so much of who you are, just to survive in this world. I wanted you to have at least a piece of it back, especially for our wedding." "You really do see me," Olivia said softly. "All of me. I try to." Vernon kissed the top of her head. "And I'll keep trying, every day of our lives together." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, unusually warm for early December in Texas. Mrs. Lin helped Olivia dress, braiding her long black hair and weaving in wildflowers that had somehow survived the autumn cold. The blue calico dress fit perfectly, and when Olivia looked at herself in the small mirror, she saw not the desperate woman from the auction block, but someone transformed by love and hope. The church was small, but it was full. Marcus and Tommy sat in the front row, their faces scrubbed clean and their best shirts pressed. Mrs. Cooper was there with her husband, as were several neighboring ranchers and their families. And standing at the altar, looking more nervous than Olivia had ever seen him, was Vernon. He wore a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, and when he saw her walking down the aisle, his face transformed with such open love that Olivia felt her heart might burst. She reached his side, and he took her hands in his, holding them like they were the most precious things in the world. The ceremony was simple, the preacher's words familiar and comforting. But when it came time for the vows, Vernon had something prepared. "Olivia, I promise to honor you, to respect you, to see you not as my property, but as my partner. I promise to fight for you, to stand beside you, to love you for all the days of my life. You are my treasure, and I will treat you as such from this day forward." Olivia's voice was thick with tears when she spoke her own vows. "Vernon, I promise to stand by your side, to build a home with you, to face whatever challenges come with courage because I know you're with me. You saw me when I was invisible, and you valued me when others deemed me worthless. I will love you forever for that, and for the good man you are." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vernon kissed her tenderly, and the small church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, and Olivia felt lighter than air, as if she might float away if Vernon were not anchoring her. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, where Mrs. Lin and Mrs. Cooper had prepared a feast that combined dishes from both their traditions. There was roast beef and potatoes alongside dumplings and stir-fried vegetables, apple pie, and sweet rice cakes. People ate and danced and toasted the newlyweds well into the evening, and through it all, Vernon never let go of Olivia's hand. As the last guest departed and the ranch finally fell quiet, Vernon led Olivia inside the house they would now share as husband and wife. He had moved his belongings into the main bedroom earlier in the week, and Olivia had added her own small touches, making it a space that belonged to both of them. "Are you happy?" Vernon asked as they stood in their bedroom, suddenly shy with each other, despite all that had passed between them. Happier than I ever thought possible, Olivia said truthfully. I used to think happiness was something that happened to other people, never to me. But you changed that, Vernon. You changed everything. Vernon pulled her close, and they stood there swaying slightly as if still dancing to music only they could hear. I love you, Olivia Dalton. The sound of her new name made Olivia smile. I love you too, more than words can say. That night, they came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other in the intimate way of newlyweds. And afterward, lying in Vernon's arms with the moonlight streaming through the window, Olivia felt truly at peace for the first time in her life. The winter that followed was cold but joyful. Olivia managed the household with practiced ease, and Vernon worked the ranch with Marcus and Tommy. But now there was a new dimension to their relationship, a deepening intimacy that went beyond physical desire. They talked for hours about their hopes and dreams, about the future they wanted to build together. Vernon taught Olivia to ride properly, and she taught him phrases in Chinese, laughing at his pronunciation, but loving his effort. In March, as the first wildflowers began to bloom across the Texas landscape, Olivia realized her monthly cycle had not come. She waited another week to be certain, then told Vernon over breakfast, her heart pounding with hope and fear. Vernon's face went through a series of emotions, shock, joy, wonder, before settling on something that looked like awe. A baby? We're going to have a baby? In the fall, I think. Olivia reached for his hand across the table. Are you happy? Vernon came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I'm terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. A baby, Olivia. Our baby. The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, and the Texas heat of summer was oppressive. But Vernon was attentive and patient, taking over more of the cooking when the smell of certain foods made her ill, and making sure she rested as much as possible. Mrs. Lynn came for a visit in July and stayed for a month, helping prepare for the baby's arrival and teaching Olivia old remedies for common ailments. In late September, as the heat finally began to break, Olivia went into labor. Vernon rode hard for the doctor in town, while Marcus stayed with her, his weathered face pale with worry. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. But finally, as dawn broke over the ranch, a baby's cry filled the house. It's a boy, the doctor announced, placing the squalling infant in Olivia's arms. A healthy boy with good lungs. Vernon, who had arrived just in time, stood at her bedside with tears streaming down his face. He's perfect, Olivia, he's absolutely perfect. They named him James Vernon Dalton, and from the moment he arrived, he became the center of their world. Vernon proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with the baby when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply staring at his son with wonder in his eyes. I never thought I'd have this, he confessed to Olivia one evening, as they sat together watching James sleep in his cradle. A family of my own, a real home. I was so focused on saving the ranch, on proving I could make my father's legacy work, that I forgot about everything else. Then you came into my life, and suddenly everything changed. You gave me a life when I had nothing, Olivia replied, leaning against his shoulder. You saw value in me when no one else did. You've given me everything, Vernon. No, Vernon said firmly, wrapping his arm around her. We gave each other everything. That's what love is, Olivia. It's two people choosing to build something together, to be better together than they could ever be alone. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were droughts that tested the ranch's resources, winters that were brutally cold, and the ever-present threat of men like Blake Harrison, though they never made good on their implied threats. But through it all, Vernon and Olivia faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. When James was 2, Olivia gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Catherine, who had their father's gray eyes and their mother's stubborn determination. The house that had once seemed too large for one lonely cowboy now rang with the sounds of children's laughter and the constant activity of a growing family. Vernon expanded the ranch gradually, buying up neighboring land when he could afford it and building up his herd. Marcus eventually retired, but stayed on in a small cabin on the property, claiming he was too old to go anywhere else, but really just wanting to be near the family he had come to love. Tommy married a girl from town and built his own small ranch nearby, and the two families visited often, their children growing up together. Through it all, Olivia never forgot where she had come from, or how far she had traveled. She and Vernon made a point of helping other immigrant workers when they could, offering fair wages and respectful treatment. When another Chinese woman found herself in desperate straits in Del Rio, Olivia hired her to help with the housework and made sure she was treated with dignity. Mrs. Lin became a regular visitor, and through her, Olivia maintained connections to the culture of her parents, teaching her children about both sides of their heritage. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the ranch was peaceful, Vernon and Olivia still found their way to the porch, to that spot where they had first confessed their love. They would sit together, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "Do you ever think about that day in Del Rio?" Vernon asked one such evening, when James was 10 and the twins were 8. "About how different things could have been?" "Sometimes," Olivia admitted. "I think about standing on that auction block, feeling like I had reached the end of everything. And then I think about you riding up like something out of a story, calling me your treasure and meaning it." She squeezed his hand. "You saved my life that day, Vernon, in every way that matters." "You saved mine too," Vernon replied quietly. "I was so lonely before you came, Olivia. I had the ranch, had work to keep me busy, but I didn't have purpose beyond survival. You gave me something to build toward, something worth all the hard days and difficult decisions. You gave me a reason to hope. We gave each other that," Olivia said, echoing the words he had spoken years before. "That's what love is." As the years continued to pass, the ranch prospered. Vernon's hard work and Olivia's careful management of household finances allowed them to weather the economic challenges that drove many of their neighbors to failure. They added more land, more cattle, and hired additional hands during busy seasons. The Dalton Ranch became known throughout the region as a place of fair dealing and honest work. James grew into a young man who inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. He learned the ranch work from the ground up, rising before dawn to ride with Vernon and the hands, and he never complained about the long hours or hard labor. The twins, Sarah and Catherine, were as different as two people could be despite their identical appearance. Sarah loved the outdoors and begged to be allowed to work the ranch alongside her brother, while Catherine preferred helping her mother in the kitchen and garden, showing a natural talent for cooking that made Olivia's heart swell with pride. When James turned 18, Vernon officially made him a partner in the ranch, and the sign at the entrance was changed to read Dalton and Son Ranch. The pride on Vernon's face that day was matched only by the pride in James's eyes as he worked beside his father, 2 generations building on the foundation Olivia and Vernon had laid. One spring evening, when Olivia was in her early 40s and Vernon approaching 50, they received word that Blake Harrison had finally been arrested for cattle rustling and would spend the next decade in prison. The news brought relief, the final removal of a shadow that had lingered over their happiness for years. "It's really over," Olivia said as they sat on their porch, watching their grandchildren. James had married young and already had 2 little ones, play in the yard. "All the threats, all the worries. It's been over for a long time," Vernon replied, his hair now streaked with silver, but his eyes as sharp and loving as ever. "Harrison was just a ghost from an old life. Our real life, the one that matters, has been here all along." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture as natural now as breathing. "Tell me again about the day we met." Vernon chuckled, a sound that still made her heart flutter. "You want to hear that old story again? I never get tired of it." So Vernon told her, his voice warm with memory, about the day he rode into Del Rio and saw a woman on an auction block who refused to let the world break her spirit. He told her about the moment he decided to bid, about the shock on everyone's faces when he called out $100, about the way his heart had pounded as he signed those papers and led her away. "I called you my treasure that day," Vernon said, pulling her closer, "and I've never regretted it. You are my treasure, Olivia. You always have been, and you always will be." "And you are mine," Olivia replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You bid high and called me your treasure, and then you spent every day since proving you meant it. I love you, Vernon Dalton. I've loved you from almost the beginning, and I'll love you until the end." They sat there as the sun set, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold, their hands clasped and their hearts full. Behind them, the house they had built together rang with the sounds of family, 3 generations now, calling this ranch home. The land stretched out before them, hard-won and carefully tended, a testament to what 2 people could create when they chose to see the value in each other. The years continued to unfold, bringing with them the natural progression of life. Vernon and Olivia watched their children grow and start families of their own. Sarah eventually married a neighboring rancher's son and helped manage a combined operation that became one of the most successful in the region. Catherine married a teacher from town and opened a restaurant in Del Rio that became famous for its unique blend of traditional American and Chinese cuisine, a perfect reflection of her mother's heritage and her own creative spirit. As Vernon and Olivia grew older, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting James and his family to carry on the work. But they never truly retired, never stopped being part of the rhythm of the land they loved. Vernon still rode out to check on the cattle well into his 60s, and Olivia still tended her garden and cooked special meals for family gatherings. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren organized a celebration that brought together nearly 100 people. Friends and neighbors, some of whom had been at that small wedding ceremony 3 decades before, came to honor the couple whose love story had become legendary in the region. Mrs. Cooper, now elderly but still sharp as a tack, made a speech about the first time Vernon had brought Olivia to her store, and how she had known immediately that they were meant for each other. "Love like yours doesn't come along often, Mrs.," Cooper said, her eyes bright with tears. "It's the kind of love that weathers storms and celebrates sunshine, that sees value where others see none, that chooses commitment and kindness every single day. You 2 have built something beautiful together, not just this ranch, but a family and a legacy that will continue long after we're all gone." Vernon stood to respond, pulling Olivia up with him. His voice was rougher with age, but still steady. 30 years ago, I saw a woman who needed help, and I thought I was rescuing her. But the truth is, she rescued me. Olivia taught me what it means to truly love someone, to see them not as they appear to the world, but as they truly are. She taught me that home isn't a place, it's a person, and that the best investment you can ever make is in the people you love. He turned to Olivia, taking both her hands in his. "You were worth every penny of that $100 and every day since. You are still my treasure, Olivia, and I am still the luckiest man alive because you chose to love me back." There was not a dry eye in the room as Vernon kissed his wife, and the celebration continued late into the evening with music and dancing and stories that had been told 100 times but never lost their charm. As the years advanced further, Vernon's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the natural slowing that comes with age. His joints ached more in cold weather, and he tired more easily. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Olivia never wavered. She cared for him with the same devotion he had shown her throughout their marriage, making sure he took his medicine, preparing foods that were easy for him to digest, and sitting with him for long hours when the pain was bad. On a warm evening in early autumn, when Vernon was 72 and Olivia 66, they sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The sunset was particularly beautiful, the sky ablaze with color, and Vernon held Olivia's hand loosely in his. "It's been a good life, hasn't it?" he said quietly. "The best life," Olivia replied, squeezing his hand gently. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "I have no regrets," Vernon continued, his gaze on the distant horizon. "Everything I wanted, everything I needed, I found with you. The ranch, the family, the love, all of it." "Vernon, you're talking like you're saying goodbye," Olivia said, alarm creeping into her voice. "Not yet," he assured her, turning to look at her with those gray eyes she had loved for so long. "But someday, when that time comes, I want you to remember something. You were never just my cook, never just my wife. You were my partner, my equal, my best friend. You were the treasure I called you on that first day, and you became so much more. You were my everything, Olivia." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "You were my everything too. You still are." They sat together until the stars came out, neither speaking, just being together as they had been for more than 3 decades. And in that silence was a conversation more profound than any words could express, a testament to love that had endured and deepened through all the seasons of their lives. Vernon lived for 5 more years after that evening, years filled with the love of his family and the satisfaction of seeing his legacy secured. When he finally passed peacefully in his sleep on a cold January morning, Olivia was beside him, holding his hand as she had held it 1,000 times before. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Texas. Vernon had touched many lives with his fairness and integrity, and people came from miles around to pay their respects. But it was Olivia's eulogy that people remembered. "My husband bid $100 for my contract on a day when nobody else wanted me," she said, her voice strong despite her grief. "But he wasn't buying a cook. He was choosing to see value where others saw none. He was choosing kindness over prejudice, compassion over indifference. And in doing so, he changed not just my life, but the lives of everyone in this room. Vernon taught us what it means to love deeply, to work honestly, to treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they are or where they come from. He called me his treasure, but the truth is, he was mine, and I will carry him in my heart until the day I join him again." Olivia lived for another 12 years after Vernon's passing. She remained active in the ranch and in her grandchildren's and great-grandchildren's lives, the matriarch of a family that had grown beyond anything she had imagined on that desperate day in Del Rio. She still cooked for family gatherings, still tended her garden, still told stories about the grandfather the youngest ones had never known. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch alone, in the spot where she and Vernon had spent so many hours together. Sometimes James would join her, or one of the grandchildren, but often she was content with solitude, with memories, with the knowledge that she had lived a life rich with meaning and love. When Olivia finally passed in her sleep at 78, she was surrounded by 3 generations of family in the house Vernon had brought her to so many years before. Her last words, spoken to James as he held her hand, were simple but profound. "Tell them our story," she whispered. "Tell them that love can come from the most unexpected places, and that every person has value if we're willing to see it. Tell them about the cowboy who bid high and called me his treasure, and how he made that true every day of our lives together." James promised, tears streaming down his face, and he kept that promise. The story of Vernon and Olivia Dalton became part of the family's legacy, passed down through generations. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management and eventually under his children's, always run with the principles of fairness and respect that Vernon and Olivia had established. In Del Rio, a small historical marker was eventually placed near the spot where the old auction block had stood, though the block itself was long gone. The marker told the story of Olivia Zhang, who had been auctioned as a cook nobody wanted, and Vernon Dalton, the cowboy who had bid high and called her his treasure. It told of how their love had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of compassion and equality that had influenced the entire region. And on the Dalton Ranch, in the place of honor, above the fireplace in the main house, hung 2 portraits. One showed Vernon as a young man, serious and determined, his gray eyes looking toward the future. The other showed Olivia in her blue calico wedding dress, flowers in her hair, her expression one of hope and love. Between the portraits hung the jade pendant she had worn that first day, preserved as a reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. Visitors to the ranch, whether family or friends, always asked about the portraits and the pendant, and whoever was telling the story that day would smile and begin the same way. She was auctioned as a cook nobody wanted. The cowboy bid high and called her his treasure, and this is their story. It was a story of love found in unexpected places, of value recognized when others were blind, of 2 people who chose each other and built something beautiful together. It was a story that proved that the best treasures in life are not bought with money, but with courage, compassion, and an open heart. It was the story of Vernon and Olivia Dalton, and it was a story worth telling again and again for generations to come. Their graves stood side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, 2 simple headstones that bore their names and a single inscription chosen by their children. Here lie Vernon and Olivia Dalton, beloved husband and wife, who found each other when both needed finding most, and who loved each other until the end and beyond. And on warm evenings when the sun painted the Texas sky in shades of gold and the wind whispered through the grass, those who knew the story sometimes thought they could feel the presence of 2 spirits there, still together, still watching over the land and the family they had built with such love and dedication. The legacy Vernon and Olivia created went beyond the ranch and the family. In their wills, they had established a fund to help immigrant workers and others facing desperate circumstances, ensuring that what Vernon had done for Olivia, others might do for those in need. The fund supported education, job training, and emergency assistance, and it bore both their names, a permanent reminder of their belief in human dignity and the power of compassion. Schools in the region taught their story as an example of the better angels of human nature, of how one person's choice to act with kindness could ripple outward to change countless lives. Young people grew up knowing that the comfortable world they inhabited had been built in part by a Chinese immigrant woman and the cowboy who had chosen to see her worth. The blue calico dress Olivia had worn on her wedding day was eventually donated to a museum in San Antonio, where it was displayed alongside the contract Vernon had burned, or rather, a replica of it created from descriptions in Olivia's journals. The journals themselves, which Olivia had kept faithfully from her first day on the ranch until shortly before her death, became treasured family documents, eventually published so that others could read in Olivia's own words about her journey from desperation to fulfillment. In one particularly moving entry, dated on their 10th anniversary, Olivia had written, "Today Vernon told me that I was the best investment he ever made, and then he laughed and corrected himself, saying I wasn't an investment but a gift. But I think he was right the first time. We invested in each other, two people who had nothing but hope and determination. And we built something that has returned 1,000-fold. Not in money, though we have been comfortable enough, but in love, in family, in purpose. I look at our children and see the future we created together. I look at this ranch and see the labor of 4 hands working as 2. And I look at Vernon and see the man who saved me, who loves me, who made me believe in myself again. That is worth more than all the gold in California." The story of Vernon and Olivia Dalton became more than just family history. It became a legend, a reminder of what was possible when people chose love over prejudice. When they saw value in those society discarded, their story was told at weddings to remind couples of what true partnership looked like. It was told at civic gatherings to encourage compassion and community. It was told to children to teach them that everyone deserves respect and dignity. And always, the story ended the same way. With 2 people sitting on a porch, watching the sunset over the land they loved, hands clasped and hearts full, treasures to each other until the very end and beyond. It was a story of the Wild West, not as a place of lawlessness and violence, though those existed, but as a frontier where new lives could be built and old prejudices could be overcome. It was a story of hope, of love, of the enduring power of human connection. Years turned into decades, and still the story was told. The ranch remained in the family, each generation adding their own chapter, while honoring the foundation Vernon and Olivia had laid. And on the porch of the main house, updated and expanded but still recognizable, couples still sat in the evening and watched the sunset, some of them whispering to each other about the 2 people who had first claimed that spot so many years ago. She had been auctioned as a cook nobody wanted. He had bid high and called her his treasure, and together they had created a love story for the ages, a testament to the fact that the greatest treasures in life are not found but recognized, not bought but chosen, and that true love can flourish in the most unlikely soil if tended with care, respect, and unwavering commitment. Their story lived on, as all great love stories do, not in monuments or grand gestures, but in the quiet legacy of lives well lived, of love generously given, of 2 people who found each other in a dusty Texas town and built something that would echo through the generations. It was a story that began with an auction and a bold bid, but it was a story that never truly ended, because love like theirs does not die. It transforms, it inspires, it endures. And that, more than anything, was the true treasure of Vernon and Olivia Dalton.